So we didn't have a detailed explanation, but with regard to bodhichitta, which is complemented by two intentions.
So
first of all, we need to know what that liberation means. Without understanding of emptiness, it would be really difficult to have the aspiration to reach enlightenment. But for those who are more intelligent, it is important to think about emptiness. For example, in Nagarjuna's Bodhichitta Vivarana, he goes through the different philosophical traditions and argues against them, the non-Buddhist tradition and the Chitta Matra. And then he goes into the Madhyamaka view and says, then someone who understands bodhicitta will have passion or compassion towards sentient beings. And then you will have this wish to compassion with which you think of, which motivates you to liberate others from suffering. And then in the Bodhisattva Charya-avatar also, in the 9th chapter, it says all these branches of teaching were taught by the sage for the sake of wisdom. So if you look at these way of the method of teaching, before actually becoming Buddhist, it seems you have to understand dependent origination. Many of my friends who are not Buddhists are quite appreciate. And then you know, when you understand the teaching of the dependent origination, you understand what Buddhism actually teaches. For those who rely more on faith, it's a different case. But for those who base themselves more on reason and logic, this is how you go about. So it is very important to have the understanding of emptiness, to feel convinced of the possibility of nirvana and enlightenment. The root of bodhicitta is great compassion, as Nagarjuna says in his jewel garland. Now, in order to have genuine compassion, great compassion, you first have to recognize what suffering is. And even the contaminated, pleasant experiences also is in the nature of suffering. And then there is the conditioning suffering. So when Buddhism teaches, when Buddhas taught, you should know suffering. What that means is, it's not the first type of suffering, the painful experience, obvious painful suffering, nor the second type of suffering, the changeable suffering. Even the non-Buddhist tradition, followers of non-Buddhist tradition, also developed an experience of concentration where they are in a neutral state of mind, overcoming the obvious painful suffering. So the Buddhism, when Buddha says no suffering, he's referring to the third type of suffering, the conditioning suffering. So in order to know that as suffering, you will not be convinced unless you understand the negativity of negative emotions. So you have to see whether negative emotions can be overcome or not. So for that, you have to know that the negative emotions are misconceptions, and Therefore, there is possibility of overcoming the ignorance, which is a misconception of reality, and for which you have to understand dependent origination. So to understand what suffering is, you finally come to understanding that you have to base your understanding on dependent origination of things. So what actually causes suffering? Who actually suffers? So when you have the greater sense of feeling dear and others feeling others dear to yourself, the more you will have the sense of caring for them and wishing them out of suffering. So in order to have this sense of feeling others dear to yourself and cherishing others, in the development of this sense of cherishing others, there is this sevenfold cause and effect instruction. But then Master Nagarjuna's jewel garland and also Shantideva's text, this one, the development of this cherishing others on the basis of equalizing, exchanging self and others, because we all are same in the sense of wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. So of course, when you think of how wanting others to have happiness, sometimes you may be thinking of, according to the sevenfold instruction, you think of others' kindness. So in the Guided Bodhisattva way of life, of course, it mentions that others have been kind to you as even when they were not your parents or relatives. And therefore, you develop this sense of dear and cherishing others because others don't want suffering but want happiness, just like yourself. So as I just said a while ago, you have to know how the sufferings, how the sentient beings are afflicted or by these three types of suffering, and you wish them out of suffering. Now, in order for that to happen, you have to first know that your own condition of being in this nature of suffering, in samsara. So without actually acknowledging your own situation, but then trying to deceive others or to bully others where you can, and to cheat on others, cheat others and wherever you can. I mean, there's no way you can have a sense of wanting out, wishing out of to go out of suffering, the samsara, for yourself. So when you are not moved by thinking of suffering, or that is your own suffering, how can you actually have the wish to liberate others out of suffering? So you have to, first of all, have this wish to go out of suffering yourself, knowing that you are stricken with these three types of suffering, and then you develop the sense of renunciation for yourself, and then you can extend that wish to go out of samsara for others. When we see painful, some people or beings undergoing painful experiences, we feel rather sad and pity. So someone who is not really moved by the suffering of the conditioned existence cannot have compassion for others. So there's a system of turning your mind away from samsara. So first you meditate on suffering, and then you think about permanent nature of life and things, but then you should not feel helpless thinking that, oh, we are all in suffering nature and we are all impermanent. I have a friend who said that he actually had hypertension or the soklung, the imbalance of wind energy, and I asked him why, and he said he meditated on impermanence of death. So the Buddha would not have taught us about suffering if there is no way out of it at all. So otherwise you could just be enjoy things. So if there is a possibility to go out of suffering, then you have to, if you know the cause of suffering, then you will have the aspiration to go out of the suffering. So we go contemplate on the impermanence of death. But then we also think of this human life being precious and having leisure and endowment, being, and then so this meaning of Purusha in the Sanskrit is someone who is able, who has the ability to do things. It's very good that we have the ability to practice the Dharma. So when Atisha came to Tibet, he actually wrote the Lamp for the Path of Enlightenment, taking for granted that all the people in Tibet who followed him were Buddhists. Whereas Indian masters who wrote texts in India, they were written in a different environment. Where in India there were so many different philosophical thoughts and schools. And if you look at the Kamalashila stages of meditation, also there is lots of arguments against opponents, because of there being such opponents in Tibet in those days. So the texts that were written by Tibetan masters for Tibetans themselves mostly were written with the idea that the disciples or the followers were all Buddhist. But the Nalanda tradition, masters of Nalanda tradition, didn't write with that kind of attitude. So they are different. So some of my friends have said that His Holiness doesn't know how to teach Lamrim. So they are not to be blamed, of course. If I just say, okay, so well, this human body is difficult to find, and all these kind of things very formally, then that doesn't make much sense to others. So I had a friend, Indian friend, in the past. So he went to classes in the Tibetan library in Dharamsala. And he found the teachings very inspiring, very touching. He felt very moved. And then he came to, next time he came to teaching on the hell realms, and he was, while listening to the teachings on hell realm, he said the hot realms were too hot and the cold hell realms were too cold, and therefore he felt tired, and then he didn't go to teaching anymore. So Bodhichitta Vivarana by Nagarjuna was written as a commentary on some lines from the Guya Samaja Tantra. So devoid of entities and so forth is the lines from Guya Samaja Tantra. So just as in the education system, we teach children from kindergarten up and then lead them upwards. In one of the Sangha's texts, it is said, in accordance with the people with small scope, and so there is a system of leading disciples from the very initial stage, and as they become more matured and can make transformation, then you lead them to higher teachings. So if you lead someone who needs very initial basic teachings and try to teach them very called sophisticated ones, they will not be beneficial. So you have to build up their understanding from, like you lead students from kindergarten to the highest university degrees. And so and ultimately people look for the highest qualifications, but then you have to actually lead them from the basic level upwards. So this is how you go about with the teachings as well. And then, according to Lamrim, you train in the paths common to the beings with small scope, then medium scope, and then beings of great scope. And so, Buddhism, bodhicitta is like the central pole of Mahayana. Verse number 17 on page 4. 18. 19. So merely having this aspiring bodhicitta is you gain lots of merit, but having promised yourself to and pledged to engage in the bodhisattva practices from then on, verse number 20 reads, for the sake of those inclined towards lesser from that time, hence 19, even while asleep or unconcerned, a force of merit equal to the sky will perpetually ensue. Verse number 20. Verse number 21 and 22 also finished. So benefiting others. So if you hinder someone who from helping even one sentient being, I mean, it is considered a negative. If even the thought to relieve living creatures of merely a headache is a beneficial intention endowed with an infinite goodness, then what need is there to mention the wish to dispel their inconceivable misery, wishing every single one of them to realize boundless good qualities. Verse number 23, 24, if those sentient beings have never before even dreamt of such an attitude for their own sake, how would it ever arise for the sake of others? 25. The Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha are hearts who have worked to overcome their afflictive emotions and become arahats. So if those beings have never before even dreamt of an attitude for their own sake, how would it ever arise? So this intention to benefit all beings who does not arise in others, even for their own sake, is an extraordinary jewel of mind, and its birth is an unprecedented wonder. How 27. So verse number 26, he's almost saying it is what Kundalama Lama Rinpoche says in his praise of bodhichitta. And verse number 28. It's 29. So as for those who are deprived of happiness and burdened with many sorrows, is satisfied. It satisfies them with joys, dispels all suffering. And so suffering here, overcoming not just temporarily, but completely uprooting the cause of suffering. And it clears away confusion. So you consider, as practitioner of bodhichitta, you consider others to be more important than oneself. There's reason to that. So you are only one single person and others are numberless, and therefore you wish put others before yourself. So because you and others are same in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, then you think of helping others. The world honors as virtuous one who sometimes gives a little plain food just respectfully to a few beings, which satisfies them for only a half day. What need be said then of one who eternally bestows the peerless bliss of Sugatas upon limitless number of beings, thereby fulfilling all their hopes? So this great, marvelous thought to benefit others, having generated it, and if you harm someone who has such an attitude, that is a very negative action. The Buddha has said that whoever bears a harmful thought against a benefactor, such as a Bodhisattva, will remain in hell for as many eons as there are harmful thoughts. And, verse number 35 and 36 also finished. Chapter 2, verse 1. Then next one shows the offerings. Verse number 7 finished. The main offering that you make is your practice, offering of your practice. And then you offer your body. You offer your body with witness, all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that your witness. Then you offer your body up to them as so that your body becomes an object that can be used for their service. Eternally shall I offer all my bodies to the conquerors of these children, please accept me. Your supreme heroes, respectfully shall I be your subject. Verse number 9 also. So offering in the sense of practice is very important. You may offer hundreds of thousands of lamps, butter lamps. And then you make dedication also after offering some ordinary objects. And then you make all your prostrations with body, speech, and mind. And then you may actually also give good advice to others. Then you may also generate faith, compassion, and so forth. Whatever you do in a day, all these practices should be offered. So all these practices are your offerings in terms of practice. So whatever merit you have accrued through these practices, of course, that is the only thing that you can, with which you can please all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And so, Jesus Milarepa says, I have nothing to offer my guru, but my, carrying out the advice of my guru. So you may do some kind of an offering of dharma and then say Ram Yam Kam and bless the dharmas and so forth without much power within yourself. But your own state of mind, which are virtuous states of mind, and your own state, like feeling, rejoicing in others' good and oneself and others' good deeds, and these can be become more powerful offerings. Verse number 11. 12. 13. 14. 15. 16. Verse number 17. 18. 19. 21. 22. 23. 24. 25. 26. So with folded hand, I beseech. 27. So you are actually regretting or confessing your misdeeds from verse number 27. 28, 29. 28, 31. 32. And then as part of this confession, there is the teaching on impermanence, meditation on impermanence. On 32, which says, but I may well perish before all my transgressions have been purified. 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 56, 59, 60, 61, 62, 64, verse 65, end of chapter 2. Chapter 3, verse 1, 2, 3, 17,
Kanada Kasan, Diana, Tron, Tabes, and Jonas Yadi, Kunlavar Chigi, Gadu Ganama, Sun, Tron, Megas, Jason, Tron, Megas, and Jonas.
So the term faithful in verse 16, should be, according to Kun Lama Rinpoche, it should be unhappiness, anger or unhappiness instead of faithfulness. Verse number 21, 22. So up to this, the text covers the 7 or 8 branches practice. Then generating bodhichitta and taking bodhisattva vows, aspiring bodhichitta and engaging bodhichitta. 25, 26, verse number 27. So this morning we generated bodhichitta. And also those who have the courage to take bodhisattva vows, you have taken it. So you have to remind yourself of bodhisattva vows, and in order not to cause decline to it, you should decline to your bodhicitta. You should remind yourself 3 times in a day, 3 times at night. And so you have to practice taking refuge in the Mahayana way and cultivating bodhicitta on a daily basis, 3 times in the day, 3 times in the night. So as I explained this morning, you should, when you have those of you who, of course, you're receiving teaching on Bodhisattva Charyavatara, you should do the visualization that was given this morning. And then you should think of bodhicitta by using these 2 verses, verse number 23 and 24 in chapter 3, and whatever number of times you wish to go over them, you should do that and feel this experience of bodhicitta, and then you should go through verse number 25 and onwards. And then bodhicitta and the view of emptiness are essence of your practice. And then if you are not using this text, you should use the other text or the verse of taking refuge in bodhicitta. When you say, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha until I'm enlightened, you should think what this I is, where it is, and who you are. And then similarly, you can think about the self of the Sangha and the Buddha. And then when you analyze the Buddha, of course, you will not be able to find him, although the Buddha has all these qualities, physical qualities of the 32 marks and major marks and 80 minor marks. So then you have to do analysis of the Buddha, you will not find. And similarly, if you take yourself, in each part of your body may be called head and so hands and so forth. Hand, for example, is made of your arm and the fingers, and then within the hand you have the bones, the joints, and so forth. And so in each of these parts, you will not find yourself. And so in this way, you should think of emptiness. Of course, it's good to recite mantra, but you having made the pledge to meditate or cultivate bodhicitta and the understanding of emptiness. If you do actually keep your words on a daily basis and meditate on compassion, bodhicitta and view of emptiness, it will be very helpful. So of course many people do recitation of mantras, deity mantras. So whenever you do the sadhanas, deity yoga sadhanas, there's always meditation on emptiness in the beginning. And so on a daily basis you would be doing the emptiness, meditation on emptiness. So if you continuously do these practices day by day, then you will feel closer and closer to bodhicitta and the view of emptiness. If you don't give thought to them at all, then it will not help. And so, on a daily basis, while remembering the meaning of the verses of taking refuge and bodhicitta, you should do it 3 times in the day and then 3 times in the night. It will definitely help. And then sometimes you should read Bodhisattva Charyavatara and use this text, the 2 verses. Verse number 28. Having found this human body once, you may lose it without having being able to make it meaningful. So it says, just like a blind man discovering a jewel in a heap of rubbish, likewise, by some coincidence, an awakening mind has been born within me. So this is true. Even if you can just imitate, try to kind of attempt to have the experience of bodhicitta, it will be really good. You'll have less anxiety, and therefore you'll be more happy. And then physically you'll be healthier, and then you will also have peace of mind. Verse number 29. So if you help others, and when you are in a desperate situation where you may have to beg for something from others, of course others will be willing to give you. And because of your merits that you have collected through the practice of bodhicitta, your wishes will be fulfilled. You'll fulfill 30. So this is true, where it says, it is the tree that shelters all beings. As Shantideva says, which intelligent one will feel despondent to ride the horse of bodhicitta, which leads from bliss to bliss. And he also makes this prayer, as long as space endures and so forth. It gives a real courage. Otherwise, if you feel discouraged, what can you do? So, in the Supreme, it is while wandering in this conditioned existence and feeling that you are tired, it is the tree that gives you shelter. It is the universal bridge that leads to freedom from unhappy states of mind, birth. It is the dawning moon of the mind that dispels the torment of disturbing conceptions. So because of our emotion, which is related to our self-centered attitude, we cause ourselves lots of suffering and pain. And if you reduce this self-centered attitude and you care more about others, this will be helpful. Verse number 32. If you are relaxed, I mean, you'll be able to do critical analysis into things. You'll make better judgment rather than being angry and having disturbed state of mind. So if you're mentally disturbed, then you also feel physically disturbed, and you will not be able to make good judgment. You'll not be able to use your intelligence maximally. And so if you are able to use your intelligence properly, then of course you will be able to develop your wisdom, which is unfathomable, and also the wisdom of clarity, and extensive learning and so forth can be developed. 33, 34. Today, in the presence of all practitioners, I invite the world to be guests at a festival of temporary and ultimate delight. May gods, demigods, and all be joyful. So when you are able to think in this way, you don't have to actually worship deities, gods, or nagas and so forth. This is the third chapter from the Bodhisattva Avatar. So of the 10 chapters, first shows the benefit of bodhichitta. And once you see it, you feel delighted. And then you embrace bodhichitta. For that, you do the 7-limb practice. To purify negativities, you have confession, and then you actually embrace bodhicitta in the 3rd chapter. And then the rest, the 7 chapters show the practice of the 6 perfections. There is no separate chapter for generosity, the perfection of generosity. So it is included within the 7-limb practice, as well as the 10th chapter, the dedication chapter. And there is no separate chapter on morality as such, but to have a pure morality, it teaches the introspection and conscientiousness. And then there's chapter on patience, and chapter on concentration, which is taught the practice of equalizing and exchanging self and others. And then there's the chapter on wisdom. So with regard to the prayer, where it says, may bodhicitta, this sublime jewel of mind, grow where it has not yet grown, and may it never diminish, but increase further and further. And so the first 3 chapters have to do with cultivating bodhicitta where it is not grown yet, and then to not cause decline to it, you have the next 3 chapters, and then you have the chapters on effort, and concentration and wisdom to further it. So I used to appreciate bodhicitta before I listened to the teaching on Bodhisattva Avatar, but felt it very far distant from me. And after having received teaching on Bodhisattva Charyavatara and having meditated on the bodhichitta, then I've been feeling that it seems I could actually have the experience of bodhichitta. It feels very close, somewhere nearby. So in this way, when you actually apply the teaching within yourself and you feel some experience, to a certain degree of experience, then you actually feel close to these paths. And otherwise, if you just study about these practices and not actually integrate it within yourself, then they seem like it seems like you are actually looking at some kind of a spectacle. So there are many scholars or monks scholars who, after having studied all these texts, then their aim is to go to America to make dollars, to make money, and nobody thinks of going to Mongolia or Russia after completing their studies. So having done all these studies, in the end, whatever you do is to serve your, to fulfill the goal of fulfilling the eight worldly concerns, and that is not good. So, Tokme Sangpo says, if you don't check within yourself, disguised while in the guise of practitioner, you may engage in practices which are not religious. So it's important to check within yourself whether your mind is really, you are being religious or not. And so when you are amongst a crowd, you should always check your speech. And when you are alone, nobody to talk to, then usually what happens is we have all kinds of thoughts going on in our head. Even with the practice of the practices for longevity, and of course you may do it for some wealth, and not think of reaching omniscient state of Buddhahood. So even with the proposition of the protected deities, you may use these practices to harm others rather than making them a real religious spiritual practice. So we have to be very careful with when it comes to practicing the Dharma. Yes. And tomorrow we'll start as usual.